What if I told you there exists a hidden language, older than any human tongue, a language whispered by the wind, sung by rivers, and carried on the wings of birds? A language said to hold the secrets of nature, the codes of destiny, and the messages of the divine. This is not just a poetic fancy, it is the legendary language of birds, also known in mystical traditions as the green language, the angelic tongue, or the perfect speech of the soul. Throughout history, sages, alchemists, and prophets have spoken of this mysterious language. They claimed it was not invented by humans, but bestowed by higher forces, a universal code that reveals the hidden harmony between spirit and matter. To speak it was to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, to hear the voice of creation itself. But what if someone truly mastered it? What if there was a man who could listen to the chatter of sparrows and hear warnings of coming storms? Who could interpret the caw of a raven as an omen of death, or the song of a nightingale as a hymn of love and transcendence? Ancient tales whisper of such a man, the one who spoke the language of birds, unlocking a wisdom that most of us have forgotten. In this video, we will dive deep into the origins of this legendary language, exploring its echoes in Hermetic teachings, Sufi mysticism, and medieval alchemy. We will uncover why so many spiritual traditions believed the birds carried divine knowledge, and what it means for us today. More importantly, we will explore whether this language is symbolic, literal, or perhaps something that exists within us all, waiting to be remembered. The story begins not with words, but with wings. The idea of the language of birds is not confined to one place or time. It is a recurring thread woven through the spiritual tapestry of many civilizations, each one recognizing that birds are more than mere creatures. They are messengers, intermediaries between earth and sky, flesh and spirit. In the mystical traditions of Sufism, there is the famous 12th century Persian poem, The Conference of the Birds, by Farid ud-Din Attar. In it, the birds of the world gather to search for their true king, the Simorgh, a mythical bird of light. Their journey through valleys of trial becomes a metaphor for the soul's ascent toward divine unity. In this story, the voices of birds are not just animal sounds, they are allegories of wisdom, guiding humanity toward enlightenment. Similarly, in Hermetic philosophy and medieval alchemy, the language of birds was often described as the green language or the Adamic tongue. It was thought to be a hidden code within ordinary speech, a way of reading the secret correspondences between words, numbers, and cosmic forces. Alchemists believed that to hear this language was to unlock nature's blueprint, the very secret of transmutation and immortality. In Celtic lore, Druids were said to understand the speech of ravens and starlings, interpreting their calls as divine omens. The Norse god Odin, who sought wisdom even at the cost of his eye, was accompanied by two ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, who whispered into his ears the news of the 9 worlds. To the Norse, these birds were not symbols alone, they were active agents of fate and destiny. The Bible itself preserves echoes of this tradition. In the story of King Solomon, it is said that he could understand the speech of animals, and particularly of birds, granting him unparalleled wisdom. In Jewish mysticism, the Bat Kol, or daughter of the voice, was sometimes described as a bird-like sound that carried divine revelation. What do all these accounts tell us? They suggest that, across cultures, the bird is seen as a liminal being,
dwelling neither fully on earth nor entirely in heaven, but moving between both realms. Its flight represents transcendence, its song carries coded meaning, and its presence signals transformation. To speak their language, then, is not simply to mimic chirps or whistles, it is to understand the subtle patterns of reality itself. But there is a deeper layer still. Many esoteric traditions emphasize that the language of birds is less about external communication and more about internal awakening. It is the intuitive perception that arises when the rational mind is silenced, allowing the soul to hear truth directly from the universe. The birds become mirrors of the higher self, singing back to us the forgotten wisdom we already carry within. From Persia to Egypt, from the Celtic forests to the courts of Solomon, the theme is the same. Those who can hear the birds can also hear the divine. They possess the key to what philosophers called prisca sapientia, the ancient wisdom that underlies all religions and sciences. Thus, when we speak of the man who spoke the language of birds, we are not speaking merely of a curious talent. We are speaking of an initiate, someone who had pierced the veil of illusion and tapped into the root language of creation itself. To understand the mystery of the language of birds, we must first step back and ask, what is a language? To most, it is a tool of communication, a structure of sounds and symbols that lets humans convey thought. But in esoteric traditions, language is far more than a tool. It is a force, a vibration, a magical act. To speak is to shape reality, to cast intention into form. Words are not just descriptions of the world, they are seeds of creation. Now imagine a language that predates human speech, one that exists not in the tongues of men, but in the resonance of nature itself. The chirp of a sparrow, the rhythm of wings in flight, the pattern of migration across the sky. These are not random occurrences. They are codes, frequencies, and signs in a universal grammar. The language of birds is said to be this primordial speech, the way creation itself whispers its secrets. Many spiritual texts hint that before humanity fractured into countless dialects, there was one pure tongue, the Adamic language, spoken in Eden. After the Tower of Babel, this language was lost to mankind. Yet the mystics claimed it still lived on in symbols, in geometry, and in nature's voices, especially in birds, whose song bridges silence and sound, earth and sky. Consider this. Birds are creatures of the air, and air has always been linked to spirit. The Latin word spiritus means both breath and spirit. In Greek, pneuma holds the same dual meaning. When a bird sings, it literally transforms breath into vibration, breath into spirit song. To speak the language of birds is thus to hear the spirit moving in the wind, to perceive what lies beneath the ordinary. But what does this mean in practical terms? Esoteric traditions describe 3 layers to this mysterious tongue. The first layer, omens and signs. In its most literal sense, the language of birds refers to divination, the reading of bird flight and song as omens. Ancient augurs in Rome would interpret the patterns of flocks, whether they flew left or right, whether they called loudly or remained silent. To them, the birds carried the will of the gods. Similarly, shamans in Siberia and North America would listen to bird calls during trance, believing they delivered messages from the spirit world. For instance, a crow circling overhead was seen not simply as a scavenger, but as a messenger of change, even of death. A nightingale singing at dusk could foretell love, creativity, or the visitation of an ancestor. These were not superstitions in the ancient world. They were part of a sophisticated system of symbolic communication, one that made the invisible visible through the flight of wings. The second layer, symbolic language. Beyond literal omens, the language of birds also refers to a symbolic code, a way of seeing double meanings in words, myths, and nature. Alchemists believed that birds were allegories of processes within the soul. The black crow represented the negrito, the dark night of dissolution. The white dove symbolized purification. The phoenix, of course, embodied death and rebirth. To understand the birds was to decode nature's poetry and to read the hidden text written into creation. This symbolic dimension also extended into wordplay. Some mystics claimed that human language itself still carried traces of the bird language. Words could be heard in multiple ways, revealing hidden correspondences. This was sometimes called the green language, a punning, poetic way of reading that opened doorways of meaning. For example, the French esotericists of the Renaissance loved to find secret truths concealed in homophones and etymologies, claiming that to hear words on multiple levels was to hear like the birds. And finally, at its deepest level, the language of birds is not about external signs or clever wordplay at all. It is about awakening an inner capacity to hear truth directly. Imagine standing in a forest at dawn, surrounded by 1,000 birds singing at once. To the ordinary ear, it is a chaos of sound. But to the awakened ear, there is harmony, a symphony that conveys not information, but understanding. This is how mystics describe the experience, not as hearing words in the human sense, but as being infused with knowledge through vibration and rhythm. In this sense, the man who spoke the language of birds was not someone who literally chatted with sparrows as one would with neighbors. He was someone who had opened the inner ear of the soul. He could hear the music of the spheres, the secret architecture of creation expressed in feather and flight. Birds were simply the most accessible channel of this higher resonance. Here lies the paradox. The language of birds is both literal and symbolic, external and internal. It is divination, allegory, and direct mystical perception all at once. And this is why so many traditions guarded it as a sacred secret. To hear the birds was to pierce the veil, to step beyond ordinary thought, to remember what was lost at Babel. Think of it this way. Every bird you hear is like a letter in a forgotten alphabet. Their songs are syllables, their migrations sentences written across the sky. To most of us, this alphabet appears as noise. But to the initiate, it is scripture. And so, when ancient stories tell us of a man who spoke this language, they are telling us of someone who remembered the primal code of creation. He was not only a listener, but also a speaker, one who could harmonize his own words, thoughts, and intentions with the universal current. His speech was poetry that resonated with the soul of nature, capable of influencing animals, calming storms, or awakening hearts. This is the first half of the mystery. The second half, as we will see, reveals even deeper dimensions, where this language becomes not just a communication tool, but a transformative force that reshapes consciousness itself. If the first half of our journey revealed the language of birds as omen, symbol, and mystical perception, the second half must take us deeper into the transformative power that this language holds over consciousness itself. For the ancients, to hear the language was one thing, to speak it was another, and this distinction is crucial. The power of speaking in harmony with creation. When we speak ordinary words, they rise from the mind, shaped by memory and thought. But when one speaks the language of birds, it is said that the words rise from a deeper place, the soul itself resonating with the secret architecture of the cosmos. The sound no longer belongs to the speaker alone, but participates in the very harmony of existence. Mystics describe this as vibrational alignment. Just as a singer can shatter glass by matching its frequency, so too could the man who spoke the language of birds alter reality by matching the frequencies of life itself. His words were not just sounds, they were catalysts. They healed wounds, revealed truths, and opened hidden doors. This is why so many legends surround such figures. In Persian Sufi lore, Solomon was said to speak with the birds, commanding the winds and even jinn through this divine tongue. In European folk tales, the hero who learns the bird language is often granted not only wisdom, but also kingship, as if mastery of this tongue proves his right to rule, not by force, but by resonance with the natural order. The language of birds as inner alchemy. To understand this more clearly, we must turn again to alchemy. The alchemists taught that transformation begins with the dissolution of the ego, the black crow of decay. From there, the soul is purified into the white dove and finally reborn as the radiant phoenix. Notice, all birds. For the alchemists, the language of birds was not simply spoken with the mouth, but enacted in the very process of transformation. Each stage of their mystical work was encoded in bird imagery, as if the soul itself were learning to sing its way back to wholeness. Thus, the man who spoke the language of birds was in truth the man who underwent inner alchemy. His life became a song of transformation, and his words, like feathers, carried the imprint of that journey. He embodied the phoenix, forever rising anew, each utterance infused with the wisdom of death and rebirth. The language of birds as universal code. But there is another perspective, one drawn from the philosophy of sacred geometry and the music of the spheres. Ancient thinkers like Pythagoras believed the universe was structured by harmony, proportion, and resonance. The movements of planets were like cosmic melodies. The forms of nature followed mathematical ratios. If this is so, then the birds, with their instinctive songs and perfectly orchestrated migrations, are natural musicians in this universal symphony. The language of birds, then, could be understood as the recognition of this cosmic code. To speak it is to align oneself with the harmonic blueprint of existence. One begins to see how the spiral of a shell mirrors the spiral of a galaxy, how the rhythm of a heartbeat echoes the rhythm of the drum, how the flight of starlings in murmuration reflects the flow of unseen energy currents. The birds remind us that life itself is patterned, meaningful, alive with hidden design. Contradictions and paradoxes. Yet like all esoteric teachings, the language of birds is shrouded in paradox. Some traditions insist it was a literal ability, an actual communication with animals. Others argue it is purely symbolic, a poetic way of describing heightened intuition. And some say both views are true. After all, the line between the literal and the symbolic is thinner than we think. When a shaman hears a raven's call during trance and understands it as a warning, is this literal speech or symbolic interpretation? The answer may be both. Reality itself, in the mystical view, is a tapestry woven from symbol and substance. To speak the language of birds is to step into that liminal zone where the symbolic and the literal merge into one. The forgotten gift within us. So where does this leave us? With a mystery that is less about some external talent and more about a forgotten gift within all humans. The man who spoke the language of birds is not a single figure of legend. He is an archetype, the reminder that we too once spoke this primal tongue. Children, in their innocence, often seem closer to it. They can spend hours listening to birdsong, lost in wonder, sensing meanings that adults dismiss. The mystics suggest that the language of birds never truly disappeared. It slumbers within us, waiting for silence, humility, and openness to reawaken it. The chatter of the modern mind drowns it out, but when we fall quiet, walking in forests, watching the sky at dawn, we might catch fragments of that old speech. Not in words, but in knowing. Not in grammar, but in resonance. Why this matters today. In an age where human language is often weaponized, used to manipulate, divide, or distract, the language of birds stands as a reminder of another possibility. Words can be sacred. Communication can heal. Expression can align us with something greater than ourselves. To rediscover this language is to reclaim the spiritual dimension of speech. It is to listen more deeply, not only to birds, but to people, to silence, to the subtle music of existence. It is to become, in our own way, like the man of legend, one who speaks not to dominate, but to harmonize, not to deceive, but to reveal, not to exploit, but to awaken. This is the deeper truth of the language of birds. It is not about birds at all. It is about us, our forgotten capacity to hear the divine, to speak in resonance with creation, and to live in harmony with the eternal song that underlies all things.
The legends and philosophies surrounding the language of birds may feel distant, poetic, even unattainable. But the true purpose of such wisdom is not to remain locked in ancient texts. It is to be lived. The man who spoke the language of birds serves as a symbol, but symbols are bridges, inviting us to embody their truth. So how can we begin to rediscover this forgotten tongue in our own lives? Step 1. The art of listening. The first and essential practice is silence. We cannot hear the subtler languages of life if our minds are filled with endless chatter. Find a quiet space in nature, a park, a forest, even a balcony where birds gather. Sit in stillness. Do not seek to analyze or interpret. Simply listen. Allow the rhythm of birdsong to wash over you. At first, it will seem like random noise, but over time, you may notice patterns, calls and responses, pauses and repetitions, variations of pitch and tone. Just as a musician begins to discern structure in what once sounded chaotic, your inner ear begins to attune. This practice trains your intuition to perceive beyond the surface. Practical tip. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Place your focus not only on the birds, but also on the silence between their notes. Often, it is in the pause that meaning arises. Step 2. Symbolic awareness. Beyond sound, learn to treat the presence of birds as symbols. Keep a small notebook. Whenever a particular bird crosses your path, write it down. A crow on a lamppost, a dove at your window, a hawk circling above. These are not accidents. Over weeks, patterns will emerge. Ask yourself, what was I thinking or feeling when the bird appeared? What situation in my life was unfolding? The ancients believed the divine spoke in signs, and the birds were some of the clearest messengers. By training your awareness, you begin to read the text of nature once more. Practical tip. Research the symbolic meanings of birds in different traditions, but do not rely only on books. Let your own intuition guide you. The same bird may carry a different message for different people. Step 3. Awakening the inner language. To truly speak the language of birds, one must go beyond observation into resonance. This is where breath and sound come in. Remember, birds transform breath into vibration, spirit into song. You can do the same. Practice humming or chanting softly when you are alone in nature. Do not aim for melody or beauty. Instead, allow the sound to arise spontaneously, as if your breath were echoing the environment. Some traditions call this toning, using sound to align yourself with the vibrations around you. Over time, you may feel that your sound fits with the bird songs, or with the wind, or even with the silence. This is the first step to speaking, not in human words, but in resonance. Practical tip. Try chanting a single vowel sound, like ah or om, while focusing on a bird you see. Notice if its behavior changes. Does it look at you, respond, or move closer? Do not force results. The goal is alignment, not control.
Step 4. Green language and wordplay. The language of birds was also called the green language, a way of hearing multiple layers of meaning in words. To practice this, begin with your own speech. Notice puns, homophones, and double meanings. Play with language. Let it surprise you. For example, the word song hides within it sign. To the mystic, this is not coincidence, it is revelation. The world speaks in riddles, and when you treat language playfully, you begin to hear hidden harmonies. Practical tip. When journaling, allow words to lead you into unexpected meanings. Write a word, then list other words it contains or resembles. Reflect on how these hidden links might reveal truths about your current life. Step 5. Living in harmony. Ultimately, the language of birds is not only about sound or symbol, it is about living in tune with the cosmic order. Ask yourself, are my words constructive or destructive? Do they heal or harm? Do I speak truth or do I weave illusions? The man who spoke the language of birds did so because his inner state was aligned with creation. His heart was pure enough to hear, his speech resonant enough to shape reality. We too can move toward this state by practicing mindfulness in speech. Before speaking, pause. Ask, is this necessary? Is it kind? Does it align with truth? If the words do not pass these gates, let them remain unspoken. Overcoming challenges. Of course, there will be obstacles. The modern world is filled with noise, literal and mental. Our schedules leave little room for silence. Skepticism may creep in, whispering, "This is fantasy." But remember, every spiritual path requires perseverance against doubt. To overcome distraction, carve out small, sacred times. Even 10 minutes in the morning can shift perception. To overcome skepticism, adopt the attitude of the alchemist. Experiment. Do not demand immediate proof. Instead, test. Listen to birds, track symbols, play with words. Over weeks, notice if synchronicities increase, if intuition sharpens, if your speech feels lighter and more resonant. This is evidence enough. The transformation. By practicing these steps, you may not suddenly hear birds speaking in perfect sentences, but you will begin to notice something more profound, your consciousness changing. The forest will feel more alive. The city sky will seem filled with messages. Your words will grow lighter, more careful, more aligned with your heart. This is the true meaning of speaking the language of birds, not to command nature, but to participate in its harmony. Not to master secrets, but to live as part of the great song of existence.
What then are we to make of the mysterious figure, the man who spoke the language of birds? Was he a myth, a metaphor, or a forgotten initiate of an ancient science? Perhaps he was all of these at once. The language of birds is more than a curiosity of folklore. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reminding us of what we have lost and what we can still reclaim. At its simplest, it is the art of listening, of attuning our hearts to the subtle rhythms of life. At its most profound, it is the remembrance of a primordial speech, the resonance that binds all things in harmony. We saw how cultures from Persia to Rome, from Celtic groves to biblical courts, revered the birds as messengers of the divine. We explored how alchemists, mystics, and poets used their flight and song as metaphors for the soul's transformation. And we uncovered that beneath these stories lies a universal truth. The natural world is not mute. It speaks, sings, signals. The question is not whether the birds have a language, it is whether we have the ears to hear it. The man who spoke this language did not hold a power denied to others. He simply remembered. He remembered that words are not only tools, but vibrations. He remembered that symbols are not inventions, but revelations. He remembered that silence itself is pregnant with meaning. And in his remembering, he opened a door to a way of being most of us have forgotten, a way of harmony, presence, and communion with the whole of creation. The good news is that this path is not closed. Each of us, in moments of stillness, has glimpsed fragments of this forgotten tongue. We have felt the strange calm when a dove lands nearby, the shiver when a crow caws at dusk, the unexplainable sense of being addressed by something greater. These are not accidents. They are invitations, whispers from the same eternal source that taught the man of legend. So the challenge is not to chase miracles, but to cultivate presence, to speak less and listen more, to treat our words as sacred, shaping them with care and intention, to recognize that every sound, every symbol, every sign can be a doorway to truth. Imagine then what our world would be if more of us spoke in this way, not with the chatter of ego, but with the resonance of spirit. Conflicts might soften, relationships might deepen, the natural world might no longer feel like other, but like kin. For to speak the language of birds is ultimately to speak the language of unity. And so I leave you with this thought. The birds are still singing. They have never stopped. The same chorus that guided shamans, alchemists, and sages still fills the air each morning. Perhaps the man who spoke their language was not unique, but simply the first among many. The question is, will we remember how to listen? Let the next time you hear a bird's call be more than background noise. Let it be a reminder. Creation is speaking. The divine is near. The language is alive. And somewhere deep within you, the part that has always known is waiting to sing it back.